Hello, students. My name is Mudassar Aziz, and today I'm going to talk about motivation and climate change in your class. First, I would like to thank you, Dr. Gulnaz, for inviting me to her class. And I've been told that this class is extremely active in as far as intellectual engagement is concerned and activism of climate change is concerned. So I'm extremely excited to be part of this class. So a little bit of my introduction. Uh, I'm an assistant professor of psychology at Zabis, which is a university in Karachi, Pakistan, and we have also started an NGO with the name of Collective of Climate Crisis, and I'm a co-chair of that organization. And if you want to reach to me, this is my email address on the slide, and that's all about me. I'm really excited about this topic. I'm a climate activist as well. So I want you to really pay attention about the concepts that we're going to talk about in this class, and we would try to involve or we'll try to use psychological knowledge to understand what can we do about climate crisis. All right, let's dig in. All right, so this is what we are going to discuss in this class today. So first of all, we are going to talk about the nature of human species. What are we like? Why are we the dominant species on this planet? And what is in our nature? And what is in our nature that helped us colonize this planet? And what is our relationship with energy and fossil fuels, and why we are so energy hungry species. Then we would dig into a very prominent social psychology and motivational psychology theory of terror management. Let me warn you here: terror in this terror management theory has nothing to do with terrorism. It is about mortality and mortality salience, and how it motivates us to do something that is counterintuitive. So we'll talk about the relevance of terror management theory in the context of climate change. Then we would talk about values and life goals and how those things are related to climate change, because values and life goals is the core topic of motivational psychology. Then we will dig into self-determination theory perspective, and we'll see how the debates of basic psychological needs is relevant in the context of climate change. And when those basic needs are fulfilled, we have a lesser need to substitute those needs for with the materials and the things that we actually don't need. Then we'll little bit talk about the debate of eudaimonia and hedonia, and basically a little bit of positive psychology and the solutions that are pertinent to our mental health crisis are also very much pertinent to the debate of climate crisis. So let's start with the first thing, that our relationship with energy and how human beings how human beings became the dominant species of the planet, and our relationship with energy. Energy is the key to humanity's world domination, not just the jet fuel that allows to traverse entire continent in few hours, or the bombs we built that can blow up entire cities, but the vast amount of energy we can use every day. We are creature of fire, and humanity's exceptional relationship with energy began hundreds of thousands of years ago with our discovery of fire. Fire did much more than just keep us warm, protect us from predators, and help us build new tools for hunting. A number of anthropologists believe fire actually refashioned our biology. Cooking transforms the energy available from food. The carbohydrates and proteins and lipids that provide our bodies with nutrition are unraveled and exposed when they are heated. So this is the first relationship with this is our first kind of um, harnessing of energy, and using making the use of fire began before we actually started um, uh, domestication of plants, or using of fossil fuels. So what this energy does, this energy of energy in the fire, it transforms the food and it makes it more available, and the nutrients are more available to our body. And what happened over the period of time, we developed small colons and relatively large energy hungry brains, and our brains started to grow very fast, and our torso began to shrink over the period of time. So we can see in this evidence in the fossils of Neanderthals and other pre-humans that they had bigger torsos, right, and that could encase a big colon, and because they used to eat relatively more raw food as we did. So cooking is something that made us humans, right? So it had a very profound impact on how we are made. All right. So then consider this: a resting human being requires about the same amount of energy as an old-fashioned incandescent light bulb to sustain their metabolism, about 90 watts, right? So we need 90 watts to sustain our metabolism, right? But what is happening that that average human being in the developed country uses more, like 100 times that energy. And if you add in the energy needed to get around, build and heat our homes, grow our food, and all other things, the average American, for example, consumes about 10,000 watts, right? So this is huge. So not just to, just keep us alive, we need energy for so many things. So what happens? The last ice age ended around 12,000 years ago. Global temperatures rose rapidly, then stabilized, and humanity embarked on its energy transformation. Right, over the hundreds of years, climate constantly changed, with the ice sheets advancing and then retreating across the northern hemisphere. It was a revolution that would see the world reach unprecedented levels of technological change. Within 2000 years, all over the world, in China, in the North, Near East, and South America, you are getting people domesticating crops, cultivating crops that have been a pretty, uh, much impossible during the ice age. But in the new warmer climate, coupled with big rise in carbon dioxide levels, it was very possible to grow plants. Now the cooking ape became a farming ape too. Now we have another tool to harness that energy. If you think closely, that it is kind of a way to uh, to uh, to capture sun's energy in the form of little grains. For example, fields act like a kind of solar panels, but instead of making electricity, they turn sun's rays into packages of digestible chemical energy. Right. Above all were cereal crops. Domesticated grains like wheat, maize, and rice acted like a kind of storable energy currency, right? So again, relationship with an energy, right? First with fire, and then with domestication of plants and animals. And you can bank it away in a silo to consume at your leisure during the winter months, or you can cart it off to market to trade with others, or invest in planting mm, the next harvest. Or you can use that stored energy to fatten up your animals, which could convert that energy into meal, dairy, or drought power. All right, so civilization was developing, and it with it some fundamental changes in the relationship between people. So we started to we form cities, and we started to build uh, build complex societies around us, right? And and religion came into existence as well, because we need some structures to control people around us, right? So complex societies were originating at that particular time. But again, with the it was a way of harnessing the power of sun, right? By the 18th century, now what is happening are increasingly popular societies were beginning to run up against the limits of what the energy provided by the daily influx of sun rays could do. So we began to turn instead into black rock that we could dig up and burn in almost unlimited quantities. We discovered fossil fuels in the form of coal, and it's a densely packed energy material, right? Coal contains the solar energy captured over millions of years by fossilized forests. So it is again solar energy, but fossilized in the form of coal. First came steam engines to turn the heat from coal into motion, then the internal combustion engine, then the jet engine. Now we have this capacity to use this solar energy in an unlimited way, right? Now what has happened? A horse can only give you 1 horsepower, right? But now we have industrial machines that can give you tens of thousands of horsepower, and its limits, and at its limits, a Saturn V rocket that you can see on the slide, 160 million horsepower to deliver you off the surface of the Earth. So fossil fuel power much more than just our vehicles. Some 5% of the world's natural gas supply is used to create ammonia-based fertilizers. So without which half the world population would starve. Turning iron into steel consumes 13% of the global coal production. An estimated 8% of the world's carbon dioxide emissions are from concrete. So we are using energy for so many things, right? So we are addicted. We are addicted to this fossil fuel based energy now. Uh, so now we have seen that human beings have uh, this strange relationship with energy, and we have somehow, before even the discovery of fossil fuels, we were trying as much as possible to harness the energy of sun by using by cooking, by uh, domesticating plants and animals, and then fossil fuels. So it is kind of in our DNA to optimize, and our brains are built in this way, right? Our bodies are built in this way that we need to optimize the energy available to us as much as we can. Now, so that was about the nature of human beings. Now let's talk about terror management theory in the perspective of climate change. Before we dig into that, before we dig into the relevance of TMT in the debate of climate change, I would just go through the ideas of what management theory is. So terror management theory says that death anxiety drives people to adopt worldviews. So basically, what it says that human beings have two capacities, right? First, to a basic instinct to survive, right? Everyone wants to survive. Every living being wants to survive. So does human beings. But we have, at the same time, we have this imaginative power to imagine future, and we can know for sure that we are going to die, right? And and there is a survival instinct, and there is an awareness that we are going to die, and those two things don't go together, right? And when they don't go together, we feel anxious, right? And we have designed mechanisms to mitigate that that anxiety, right? And this is what we call death anxiety in the context of TMT. So death anxiety drives people to adopt worldviews that protect their self-esteem, worthiness, and sustainability, and allow them to believe that they play an important role in a meaningful world. Some of these views lead to troubling actions, right? So it is a very it's a very uncomfortable idea that we are just another creature, we are just another species, right? So what we do, we have designed these cultural worldviews that we are extremely meaningful, right? Whenever we see threat to our lives, we try to invest in something that is going to outlast us, right? So and we try to boost our self-esteem. So basically, two things: we invest in the world whenever we are salient with our mortality. We invest in the worldview that we hold, and we try to boost our self-esteem. How do we do that? I'm going to explain it in a bit. So we try to insulate ourselves from our deep fear of living an insignificant life destined to be erased by death. So we have this deep fear that we might lead an insignificant life, but we have devised mechanisms to mitigate that. So one path to address this fear is to assure ourselves that we are part of important groups. So if a group means that our cultural worldview, the people that we belong to, we derive sense of belonging from. So the desire to reinforce cultural significance in the face of death often results in display of prejudice based on the belief that group with which one identifies is superior than any other group, right? Any other out group. So this out group in group understanding within a person, takes a stark color. It enhances with mortality salience. And we know that from group dynamics that we prefer our ancient group. It's a common knowledge now. So but within the under the under the under mortality scenes, when we feel that there's a threat to our life, we tend to invest in something that's going to outlast us. And this is what TMT research says as well. Whenever we even artificially um, you know uh, raises awareness of death in someone's subconscious, right? We see that the desire to have kids increases. So why does it happen? Because we 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 think that we're gonna beat death by having offsprings, right? So we're gonna live in this world through our kids. So but we'll see how this unfolds as far as climate change debate is concerned as well. So when people identify themselves in distinction to non-human nature, they'll become especially negative towards animals and the natural world when reminded of their own death. Research suggests that this is indeed the case, right? So this is the point that I was trying to come to. So basically, what happens when we are reminded of our own death? We tend to invest in a worldview, right? That is true. But what happens when we are reminded of our non-human nature? Non-human nature means that when we are told that you are just another creature, right? You are going to die as ants die, as elephants die, as any other species die. So what do? What happens? We we tend to distance ourselves from the natural world. And what do? We invest in the world that is created by our cultural dynamics, right? Our cultural worldview. We invest in our cultural worldview that makes us unique, that separates us from the other living species. So, as mere animals, humans instinctively want to survive and propagate. Um, but we are unique in that our brains are capable of abstract and symbolic thought. This cognitive ability allows us to remember the past and plan for the future, be creative, and anticipate what others may be thinking or feeling in response to our actions or belief systems. Now, the cost of this vast cognitive ability is a self awareness that allows for mortality awareness, the recognition of one's inevitable death. At our at inevitable death, and that feeling is extremely uncomfortable, and and we have devised mechanisms uh, to to reduce that anxiety. So all humans mitigate their existential fears by embracing distinct cultural worldviews that provide a sense of individual and group identity within recognized socio-cultural contexts. All right. So now we will see how this debate um, is pertinent um, in climate change debate. So, Jamie Goldberg and colleagues conducted two experiments in which college undergraduate students wrote essays either about their own death or about a neutral topic. Right. This is a very common thing in TMT research. So you ask one group to write about their own death and the other group to write about a neutral topic. For example, a dental pain or some listening to music or just a very neutral topic, right? So what happened? Subjects who wrote about their own death became especially disgusted by animals, right? For example, seeing maggots or cockroaches and body products, they got extremely disgusted comparatively to the group from the as compared to the group who wrote some other neutral essay. So what is happening? What are the dynamics here? So when you are reminded of your own death, you try to distance yourself from the nature or, or of your own self. You don't try to identify yourself as someone who is just another creature. Your creatureliness is is a very uncomfortable thought for you when you are reminded of your own death. That this idea that we are one with this world, right? These plants, these animals, we this all organic life is based is ha- it's based on few common ancestors, right? And we are all related. We are related to plants and animals and all the other species, and there's a huge overlap of DNA similarity between us and cabbages and rats and animals and any other plant or any other kind of life on this planet. This thought is extremely uncomfortable when we are reminded of our own death, right? So now this is these are the two essays that were given to two subjects um, that when before they were asked to rate their disgust about animals and other forms of life. Right, and so the first essay was about the boundary. This is an the first paragraph that you're seeing on the slide is about an essay where the author is trying to blur the difference between humans and animals, right? The boundary between humans and animals is not as great as most people think. What appears to be the result of complex thought and free will is really just the result of our biological programming and simple learning experiences. So, these are the two essays that were given to two groups, and we were seeing their responses afterwards. So, when asked to evaluate the authors of these essays, the subjects who had written about the neutral topic expressed essentially the same attitude towards both authors, right? In contrast, this is interesting now. In contrast, the subjects who had written about their own death rated the author of the essay, proclaiming the similarities between animals and humans as less likable, intelligent, and knowledgeable. Right? So they did not like the authors. Students who wrote about their own death did not like the author who was trying to blur the boundaries between animals and humans. This is interesting, right? So when we are reminded of our own death, we don't want to identify with the larger nature, right? And we don't like the people who are trying to blur the boundaries between humans and other forms of lives. I want to share another very interesting study with you here, and this study was conducted by Tim Kasser and Canon Sheldon. Um, they established that when people are reminded of their own death, they try to distance themselves from the natural world, right? So basically, what this research was, so basically, in an experimental research, subjects participated in a shorter version of forest management game. So after writing brief essays about their own death or about listening to music, so basically there were two groups. One group wrote about their own death, and the other group wrote about listening to music. And afterwards, subjects were requested to imagine that they were in charge of a timber company and were asked to make bids as how many acres of tree in a state forest they would like to cut down. So, what did they find? That the subjects who wrote about death made bids to cut down significantly more acres of forest. So, basically, the point that I'm trying to make here is that when people are reminded of their own death, they get more aggressive towards nature, right? So, it's not a very good idea to remind people of their death while communicating the message of climate crisis. It's not a good idea. So what do we need to do is to keep this research and this idea um, in mind when we are designing any messages related to climate research. We see here that there is no shortage of possible climate change mortality reminders from global to local scales. Information about climate change induced uh, declines of food production, projected deaths from unprecedented heat waves, or generally doomsday predictions. So we see in this slide that climate change environmental threat is first, when we kind of present climate change warnings or crisis in this way, that there's a uh, that we are highlighting somehow mortality very profoundly. What happens that defense mechanisms um, activates mechanisms activate. So what kind of defense mechanisms? We try to stick to the worldview. We try to enhance our our self-esteem. And what else we try to do? We try to distance ourselves from the larger context of nature, right? And we don't try to invest in the nature anymore, because we are distancing ourselves from the very nature of human beings, that we are just another creature. So individuals take actions that is congruent with their pre-existing cultures and worldviews. And we know that generally worldviews are materialistic. right? And people are consumption oriented. So, whenever you are reminding them of their deaths, they are distancing themselves from the nature, and they are not willing to take actions um, that are not congruent. They are not willing to take actions that are not congruent with their worldview, right? And their worldview is mostly based on consumerism and materialism. So we have seen this thing that environment focused TMT studies investigating proximal and distal defenses demonstrate or suggest that the death reminders reliably increase humans' selfish exploitation of natural resources, material consumption, and our discomfort with wilderness landscapes, right? So, mortality reminders may also lower our perceived connection to other non human life forms and prompt our likelihood of climate change denials, right? And we have seen this thing in the research that climate change threats increased preference for authoritarian leadership, and distancing of our group is in areas unrelated to climate change. So the point that I'm trying to make here, or the point the terror management theory is trying to make here through this research, and it's a very recent research. I would share this paper with you guys. So the thing that I'm trying to say here, that the message of climate crisis is supposed to be designed in a different way, rather than this doomsday scenario, right? When we say that that it's all doom and gloom, and we we activates someone's mortality in someone's mind, um, they they behave and they think consciously and subconsciously in a counterproductive way that is not serving our um, climate change activism. All right. So now we have another topic that we are going to talk about, that is about values and life goals. This is our third topic, and there is one other topic after that, which is about self-determination theory and climate change. So, values and life goals are the aspects of people's identities that reflect what they deem to be desirable, um, important, and worthy of striving for in their lives. Right. So what values and goals are. And this is because values and life goals are understood to be the higher order cognitions that influence the more specific attitudes individuals hold with regard to the people, objects, and ideas they encounter in the world. So we have seen this thing in quantitative empirical studies, that people who strongly endorse such self-enhancing materialistic values also express more negative attitudes towards nature, uh, non-human nature. So, for example, this study by Schulz and colleagues, they studied 6 nations and found that people that value for power and achievement were associated with viewing humans as consumers of rather than part of nature. Right? So, they see nature as something that one needs to consume, rather than being a part of that nature, and protecting nature is like protecting ourselves. They don't see nature like that. So where these self-enhancing values promote concern about ecological damage, this concern is limited to an egotistic consideration of how such damage might affect one personally. And we have seen this thing in other studies um, in Australia, and they have documented that materialistic goals, caring about more about those goals, is significantly associated with negative attitudes towards environment and lower level of biophilia. And people don't love nature when they have self-enhancing um, materialistic values. So what do we need to do? Of course, we need to understand that these goals and these values actually fuel what we do, what kind of actions that we take in our lives, right? And we'll talk about these things more in the perspective of self determination theory as well. But you'll see that this is extremely pertinent in the debate of climate change, because climate change is, of course, um, is relevant to our. Uh, it's anthropogenic, right? And we are responsible because we are consuming at unprecedented rates. So if we don't understand that we need to change our values related to consumerism and materialism, then we need to then this there is no way that we can save this planet. Now, studies in the US and UK show that adolescents who more strongly endorse materialistic life goals in life report themselves as being less likely to turn off lights in unused rooms, to recycle, to reuse paper, and to engage in other positive environmental behaviors. And there are so many other studies, right? These are these are the seminal studies of goals and values. But there's so many other studies in America, in Australia, in Europe, in Asia, and so many cross-cultural studies that have established this thing, that people who endorse materialistic life goals, they 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 negatively engage with the environment. And they are not very pro-social. They they do not engage in pro-environment behaviors. For example, they do not ride bicycle, they don't reuse paper, they don't buy second-hand things and stuff like that. A relatively high focus on materialistic goals related to higher ecological footprint arising from lifestyle choices regarding transportation, housing, and diet. So, of course, lifestyle is the thing that we need to change, right? And what kind of lifestyle that we need to have? Self determination theory has a solution to that, has a solution to that particular problem. Um, Now, finally, the data at the national level also demonstrates negative association between environmental behavior and materialistic values. Tim Kasser, a very impressive researcher in materialism, he has written a very impressive book as well. I'll share the link of that book as well. You know, um, it's a must read for to understand what is important and what is not important for the well-being of human beings. So I would recommend you to go through that book as well. So Tim Kasser's correlated archival data about the values of large samples of undergrad and teachers in 12 wealthy nations with the amount of carbon dioxide each nation emitted in 2003. And they have done so many researches after that as well. So what they have found, that after controlling for GDP per capita carbon dioxide emission were higher in countries where citizens placed greater priority on pursuing goals such as wealth, achievement, and competition, and all the all the materialistic behaviors. So this is one thing that is correlated, of course, with materials, but we cannot say for sure, because it's a correlation that whether these materialistic values is causing this unhappiness, or unhappiness is leading to these materialistic values. But now we have seen this thing in experimental studies as well. When we prime people for a short amount of time with materialistic values, um, they do not behave in a very pro-environmental way. So, now we are pretty much sure that the causal direction is from materialistic values to not so pro-environmental behaviors. Now, most important and very interesting topic of self-determination theory (SDT) and materialism, and we'll see that this is kind of a solution part to values and goals uh, discussed earlier. When we look around at contemporary consumer culture, it is clear that people are constantly bombarded with messages that needs can be satisfied by having the right products, feel unsafe on the road or in your home, buy the right tire or lock. Worried that you will die young, eat this cereal and take out insurance from that company just in case. Lawn look bad in the comparison with your neighbor. Buy this lawnmower and fertilizer. Can't get a date? Buy these clothes and this shampoo and that deodorant and whatnot. So no adventure in your life. Take this vacation. Buy that sport. They are trying to bombard you with all these advertisements, right? So consumer societies also provide many role models, suggesting that a high quality of life of, that is need satisfaction occurs when one has successfully attained material goals. Our heroes and heroines of consumeristic cultures are on the whole wealthy, good looking and often famous. And these are the people we are told who are successful, whose lives we should strive to imitate or even emulate. So this is the consumer culture that we are living in. We are told that this that in order to improve your life, you need to buy stuff, right? You know they we'll talk about these things in detail in a while. That human we have identified what kind of needs, psychological needs that need to be fulfilled and that would contribute to our well-being, right? And no material things can plug those those psychological needs, right? But what those advertisements are trying to do, they are trying to make you feel that you can fulfill your psychological needs by having these things, right? And they do those things, they do satisfy you for the time being, but they are very hedonistic in nature, right? The effects of those things um, wear off very 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 quickly. We need to understand what is important in life to have a very good well-being and what is not, right? Again, the message of positive psychology is equally is equally pertinent in climate crisis solutions. So we'll see. SDT is a positive psychology perspective, and so is goals and values. But of course, they are equally relevant in climate change debate as well. So we have seen that materialistic values lead people into style of life, and we have experienced that do a rather poor job of satisfying their needs. Right. So we have seen advertisements and messages all around us that consume this, do that. To satisfy your psychological needs, but actually they this is what we call need substitution model. We but when we consume those things, they 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 do not fulfill our psychological um, needs of certain psychological nutrients, right? And what are those psychological nutrients I'm talking about? Those things are autonomy, competence, and relatedness, right? So what those things are, I'm going to talk about those things in a bit. But what I'm trying to say is that materialistic values lead people into a style of life and way of experience that do a very poor job in satisfying their needs. So, taking our nutritional metaphor a bit further, consumer societies sells junk food, promising that it tastes good and makes us happy. As a result, people buy it. Alas, they are full only for a short time, and the promise is false, and the satisfaction is empty, right? And after a certain amount of time, they feel worse off from the time they started off. So basically, uh, you know, when we try to fulfill our psychological needs with, with the with the things that we don't need, with the things or the materialistic values and ideas, they do a very poor job in fulfilling our psychological needs. What those psychological needs are: autonomy. The need for autonomy refers to the sense of choice and volition in the regulation of behavior, right? And so it's that you are leading your own life. You are not just puppets in the hands of other people, right? Nobody is dictating your life. You are master of your own life. This is what we mean by autonomy. You are making your own choices. You have all the agency. You are an agentic person, and you are master of your own life, right? And this is one of the, if not the biggest predictor of one's well-being. And there are so many concepts that overlap with autonomy in psychological literature. But I love this theory for explaining well-being because people have conducted researches and conducted CFAs and EFAs and complex statistical analysis, and they've found that every other need falls into either of these three categories, right? So these three needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness, they almost encompasses all of the needs, all of the psychological needs, all or that would predict our eudaimonic well-being. So I was talking about the need of autonomy, which is related to sense of choice and volition in the regulation of behavior. And the need for competence concerns the sense of efficacy one has with respect to both internal and external environments. So basically, the competence is about mastery over the environment. You feel efficacious about something in the life, right? So it has a connotation of the competence that we use, the word competence that we use in everyday life, but it has something else in it as well. Okay, so the third concept is extremely profound, and that thing is need for relatedness. That refers to the feeling connected to and cared about by others. So, uh, this sense of belongingness is extremely important as far as our well-being is concerned. And these advertisements, if you analyze those advertisements in the context of STT, they try to sell you falsely that you are having autonomy, competence, and relatedness through those advertisements. For example, if you're having a meal, a nice pizza party with your family, and you are extremely happy, you're not happy that you are eating pizza. You are actually happy that you are deriving sense of belongingness for being around the family, right? So they are sugarcoating it with the pizza. It's not the junk food that you are eating with your family. It is the family that is giving you happiness, right? So we need to decipher those messages in the context of what makes us happy and what doesn't. Um, so now we have seen this thing that the need for relatedness is feeling connected to significant others. It's not and those connections are meaningful and deep, not just your 2000 Facebook friends and 10,000 Twitter followers. They won't contribute to your well-being, right? But real meaningful connection, even if it is one, right? That one connection, meaningful connection of belongingness, love, and relatedness would can contribute to your well-being more than thousands or millions of connections that are meaningless or shallow. So meaningful, strong, deep connections can contribute to your well-being. And according to SDT, satisfaction of these basic needs foster well-being and support for, and satisfaction of each is necessary condition for a person's growth, integrity, and well-being, both within and across domains. So now, SDT, self-determination theory, has a legacy of almost 30 years now, and we have seen this thing that there's so many meta-analyses based on SDT, that these are the three things that we need to pursue in order to enhance our well-being in a very pure form, right? For example, love and relatedness is something is very well researched, and now unconditional positive regard is also part of self-determination theory, that belongingness and love is supposed to be unconditional in order it to serve as something that is contributing to your well-being, right? So if it is shallow, it's not gonna do anything for your well-being. So this theory was posed by DC and Ryan, and they are still one of the most celebrated researcher in this particular field, and they have provided extensive review of the theory of the basic needs and its empirical support. Um, and Right. Okay, so I can't emphasize this point enough, that this theory is heavily substantiated by huge amount of research. So if you say, I'll share so many papers, peer-reviewed papers on this particular topic, but I would also suggest you to go to their website and see their published articles on that particular website. So self-determination theory.org, this is the address of the website. So just visit that website and see what kind of work they are doing, right? And uh, you know from environment to education to health to clinical psychology and so many other topics. All right, so coming back to our topic. So again, I'll stay in the perspective of self-determination theory for a little while, and see how this is more relevant in the debate of climate change. So when people have particular need that is not well satisfied, their whole philosophy of the future tends also to change, right? So for example, for our chronically and extremely hungry man, utopia can be defined simply as a place where there's a plenty of food. The person can think that if only he is guaranteed food for the rest of his life, he will be perfectly happy and will never want anything more. The same dynamics seems to occur in the case of materialism. Individuals who have not had their needs well met in the past come to think that the wealth and possession will bring them happiness and good life, right? Part of this belief is due to the fact that society tells them that material path will make them feel secure. And part is because our bodies require more material comforts to survive in any case. So basically, a strong focus on materialistic values is often a symptom of manifestation of personal history characterized by a relative failure in need satisfaction. So, this needs to be understood in a very particular context, that when needs are not met, there's a certain void that these materialistic forces can they're trying to take a place in your psychology where these needs are not met, right? So, if those needs are met, you can see that you are intrinsically driven. We'll talk about intrinsic motivation and flow in a while. So you are intrinsically driven, right? Not concerned about rewards and incentives, and you are not just a rat in a maze who's looking for rewards, right? You are living authentically, right? When you live authentically, you pursue the right things. Materials don't add to your well-being. These unmet needs lead people to be unhappy and to develop materialistic values. People are likely to be materialistic if they watch a great deal of television. So this is pretty obvious, right? When you are exposed to so much advertisement, you are, you know, they have they are using psychology, of course, all the psychology, right? Or they are hiring all the psychologists to persuade you to buy more and more stuff, right? And we know they are good at it. That's why we have huge houses with so many things that we don't need, to please people that we don't like, and to compare and constantly comparing ourselves with other people, so that we feel I don't know, really bad about all the time. Another topic that I want to talk about is materialism, intrinsic motivation, and flow. As you know, for a very long time, intrinsic motivation and flow, they have, researchers have established that there is a lot of overlap between the two concepts, because flow cannot be established without the right amount of intrinsic motivation, but flow has some other concepts within it. So flow and intrinsic motivation are basically our pinnacle of autonomy and self expression. So such an experience where people are not driven uh, by some external rewards that are outside of them. They are engaged in something for the sake of doing that particular thing, right? They are not pursuing some external rewards, grades, money, or anything else. They they just what flow is. You use when you are engaged, engrossed in an activity in such a way that you lose sense of time, and you need to be intrinsically motivated to do that particular activity, and there is a certain match of skill and challenge, right? You're experiencing a certain kind of challenge, and you have a certain amount of skill, and you're increasing your skill with the increasing amount of challenge, right? And you're so absorbed in that particular activity that you lose sense of time, but you have a sense of fulfillment uh, as well. So flow or engagement is a form of engagement, right? And an engaged life, what else could be better than an engaged and extrinsically motivated life? And this is the thing that we need to pursue, and we need to fill our lives with, so that there is no more space for the things that are not important for our well-being. And those materialistic things won't be having any space when we are already pursuing the right goals, right? So when an individual is doing something for no other purpose than the sheer joy, interest, and challenge involved. A great example of intrinsic motivation is children's play, but it can also be seen in any number of adult activities such as climbing mountains, painting pictures, hiking in the woods, and even writing books. So people can also feel flow or intrinsic motivation in non-leisure activities such as work. I'm assuming that work is a non-leisure activity, and probably it is indeed non-leisure. Anyhow, so intrinsically motivated, we do what we do because it is enjoyable, involving, and challenging. And one of the most interesting questions researchers have asked about such experiences concerns what happens when we are rewarded for doing the things they find intrinsically motivating. So the point is that if you are intrinsically motivated for a particular thing, let's say for painting, right? You are intrinsically motivated, right? Now, if we add an extrinsic motivation, extrinsic reward system on that particular intrinsic motivation, now we have intrinsic motivation plus extrinsic motivation. Intuitively we say is equal to more motivation, right? But this is not true. What happens? This is a very interesting perspective in motivational psychology. When we are intrinsically motivated, and we are rewarded for that intrinsic motivation, our intrinsic motivation diminishes, right? So what happens? So so what happens if the rewards are important motivators of behavior? Giving people money and praise for doing something they enjoy could increase their motivation, but this is not the case. And we have seen, and this is what we call over justification effect, that intrinsic motivation plus extrinsic motivation is not equal to more motivation. Basically, intrinsic motivation, you need to protect your intrinsic motivation from extrinsic rewards so that you just keep doing it for the sake of doing it, and you focus on the sheer joy that you're deriving from that particular activity, right? um, so the point, the relevance, I'm really hoping that you are connecting this with climate change, that if you are filling your life with the right things, if you are, and this is need substitution model of SDT as well, if you're filling with if you're engaging yourself with the right ideas, right, you won't have psychological space to consume more, right? So as we have talked about earlier, that TMT says that if we threat people with all these messages that you are going to die, they are not going to listen to you, because we are designed in this particular way that we would distance ourselves immediately from the nature when there is a threat to ourselves, right? So what is the best way? So the best way is proposed by SDT, that we need to fill our lives with the right things, that we are left with no space for these nonsense things that they're trying to sell us, that they would fill, that they would satisfy our psychological needs, but actually they won't, right? So again, coming back to this point, that rewards undermine intrinsic motivation, right? For example, if you are good at something, right? For example, let's say you are good at writing, and someone starts praising you on that particular thing. You need to be cognizant of this fact that this might undermine your intrinsic motivation. So, or if someone tries to pay you for the things that you love, right, it might undermine your intrinsic motivation, right? So it's a very it is something that you need to protect, right? Let's dig into a little more literature on over justification effect. And we have seen this thing from United States and Korea. It's a very interesting study by Ken and M. Sheldon and his colleagues. They asked students from USA and Korea to describe the most satisfying event that they had in the preceding week, month, or semester, and then rate how much they felt pleasant and unpleasant emotions during the event. When money or luxury was important, people's emotions were less positive and more negative. So means that that materialistic things or external rewards, you know, they would undermine your well-being. They would undermine your intrinsic motivation, the joy of doing things, right? So human beings have this natural instinct to explore and be interested in the things around them, right? But it can be easily destroyed by external forces. You need to be extremely cognizant that what is happening around you, and you know this new version of a particular thing is not gonna fill the space in yourself that is gone as a psychological nutriment in your psyche. So another good example of the way in which materialistic desire underlying positive experiences come from research within four groups of college students from the United States and South Korea. This is the example that I was giving you. So you know they and this study is seminal and very interesting. That you know when you know goals are when they are rewarded for things that they are intrinsically motivated for, people lose intrinsic motivation. And there are very interesting studies by Lepper. They are classical studies done in mid 70s by Lepper. You need to follow the person. You know, very interesting ideas. That you know when they asked kids to play with their toys, they kids kept on playing with the toys for a very long amount of time. And when they started rewarding kids that you know if you play with this toy I'll give you, if you play with this toy for 5 minutes I'll give you this token, right? Or this piece of candy, right? Or something that is external to their inner self. You know they stopped playing for after you know a couple of tasks. You know it became a chore for them rather than a leisure activity, right? So it's extremely important that we understand. Before I take a leave from you, I'm going to leave you with this idea that what is happening in extremely vulnerable countries and extremely vulnerable cities like Pakistan and Karachi, especially. Karachi is one of the most vulnerable cities for climate change, and Pakistan is going to be the fifth hardest hit country for climate change. So this is a video showing the vulnerabilities of a city that where 45 degrees Celsius is not a big deal in summers, and in just 2015, during a heat wave, thousands of people died because of heat wave, and every year it happens, and these numbers are not even true representative of what is happening on ground. So in this video, you would see a person like us who is trying to change something in cities like Karachi, and it is extremely difficult where authorities are not cooperative, there is no governmental structure, and you know we have created a collective of climate crisis, and we're trying our best to do something for the city, and we are engaging students and teachers and general community to help us to do something, just clean the city and grow some trees and try to make people aware of what kind of issues are there. But you know you would have a glimpse of kind of problems that people are having. You know, understanding climate crisis really needs a lot of cognitive capacity. Even if people are malnourished, they won't be able to comprehend the gravity of the problem. Anyhow, just have a look and try to understand what kind of problems people go through. And just this is just a food for thought and a glimpse into the activism that we do. But these ideas are okay. So I would like to just quickly summarize what we have covered in this lecture, and then we would take a leave. So, starting from what is our relationship with energy, right? How we have optimized it over the period of time, and how we are addicted to this, fossil fuel energy. It is extremely densely packed. We can develop with this energy, but we need to change our relationship with this kind of energy in order to go any further. We are at the brink of extinction. We need to understand what is important and what is not. Now we have developed, right? We have exhausted the resources of this planet, but we need to understand that this is not going to last for for even a couple of more years. We need to, we know that COP26 is happening in Glasgow. We need to listen to the world leaders. What are they saying about, the consumption uh, uh, behaviors by the developed world? We need to pay heed to those leaders. Okay, energy consumption. First thing first, we talked about those things, right? From cooking, from domesticating, and then fossil fuel and coal and all those things. We started, you know, using that kind of energy. Then we talked about terror management perspective, how our mortality salience can diminish or undermine our climate change cause. Right? We need to change the way we communicate the message of climate change crisis. Extremely important, right? Then we digged into the debates of values and goals, and they are extremely important in determining what do we do in our lives. Then we talked about self-determination and theory and basic psychological needs, and those are the needs that can contribute to our well-being. If anything is related to that, you know just a little thing, whenever you're trying to buy something, whenever you're trying to do something, ask yourself this question: what kind of psychological need is this thing is really going to contribute to, right? So if it is going to contribute to your psychological well-being, buy it. Otherwise, it's a scam, right? They are trying to exploit something in you that is left unfulfilled psychologically, right? So so be very cognizant of when you are consuming um, advertisements, and we are consuming so many advertisements these days, like I don't know, couple of thousands or even more on everyday basis. So be very cognizant of those things. Then we talked about flow and intrinsic motivation, and how when you are intrinsically motivated to do something, you know, you it really contributes to your well-being, um, right? So try to find something that is more meaningful, that is more engaging than those materialistic things not that is not going to contribute to your well. This is what we all discussed in today's class. I hope you would, read more on these topics, and it would contribute to the cause of climate change as well. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me using the email address I have shared in the beginning. And thank you very much. Bye bye.